Well, hello out there on the internet. Welcome back to another episode of the Ricecast. My name is Anthony Russo. I am in sunny Clearwater, Florida, sitting across from the doctor, the pastor, Willie Rice.
Is it sunny today? I think
it's.
We've had a lot of rain of late.
I like to call it sunny Clearwater, Florida. As if I want people to say Anthony's nice, right, even if he's not nice every second of every day.
That's right.
So it's like sunny Clearwater, Florida. It rains sometimes, but it's sunny Clearwater,
Florida. That it is, and we are happy to have it.
In the existential sense, we are in sunny Clearwater, Florida. In the practical sense,
there's a great story, and I grew up hearing this. I think it's true. It was certainly a myth passed along my family that there was a time when the St. Pete Times, which is now the Tampa Bay Times, that the St. Pete Times would give a free, and this is a newspaper for all our young listeners. They actually used to print news on a paper and deliver it to the house.
Newspaper, right.
So, fascinating concept. So, that there was a time when the newspaper would give out free editions if a day went by without sunshine. Have you ever heard this?
Wow, no, I never heard this.
Maybe we should research to see if it's true or whether my parents were just lying to me. But I've heard the story that there was a time when the St. Pete Times would give you a free newspaper if there was no sunshine during the day.
That's a wonderful gift to give your community because you need something to read.
That's right.
Because it's raining. I'm going to be inside.
And I think the thing is they knew that would only happen rarely. And the point is, most of the time we have some sunshine during the day.
Yeah, I heard recently St. Pete has the record for the most consecutive days of sunshine.
See, there you go.
Which we're going to just continue to spit off unverified facts here at the top of the Ricecast.
Right on the internet where we belong.
But I heard that recently.
We might as well join the parade.
Yeah,
right? Just spit things out.
When in Rome. Let me tell you what else I heard. I don't know if I told you this at all, but very recently, a month or so ago, I was thinking about something, or I was in a position where I was like, man, I want like some news stories from the day, but I don't want like all of the news. There's so much. I wish someone could just sort of condense it down in a way that I could get my hands on it, and it was like right there. And I looked at Rachel and said, I think I just described a newspaper.
That's right.
I think I just described a newspaper.
Yeah, you did.
And we're back to the newspapers again, maybe. I don't know. But newspapers are great. If you've never experienced one, if you're young and out there, you should check one out one time. Lots of fun puzzles.
They say that one of the things that's fun to do with a millennial or younger, I don't know if it's Gen X, maybe this, or Gen Z, whatever.
Gen Z would be younger, yeah.
Is to ask them to fold a newspaper, unfold it and see if they can fold it back.
There was a trick.
Or a map. A map is even better. Unfold a map and you ask. I don't know if you've seen this where, like, you get some Gen Z, so you can play this with your grandkids. Right?
Yeah.
And the first thing was they put a phone, the old rotary phones, and ask them to make a call.
Right.
I'd
fail that one.
They unfolded a map to see if they could fold a map and some other skill sets that they do not have anymore.
Right. The folding of the map, that is a timeless road trip memory to me. It's late, you're tired, you're lost. And now you've got to unfold.
It's a skill set.
The massive map. You haven't been on a road trip unless you've angrily smashed a map back together.
So many good memories that children will no longer have.
That's right. I also saw something the other day. We're off to a fast start here today on the podcast about people having to deliver pizzas. They used to have to deliver pizzas without these GPSs. And that just hit me for the first time. Like, what a feat that must have been. Here's an address.
It was 3 hours or less back then. Yeah,
the guy's lost.
Yeah, that's right.
The guy's halfway to Tallahassee.
That's right.
I don't know where 4th Street is. Who am I? Oh, the world as it used to be. But yes, we are here at Calvary Church in Clearwater, Florida, and just started a new series this weekend. Pastor, what do you think about our new sermon series?
Well, I've been excited about it. We kind of plot out the year back in the summer and spent a lot of time reading. So this was one I was interested in and anxious to do, and also challenged by. I just am convinced that we need to, in our preaching, make sure that we're giving attention to our doctrine, what we think and how we think. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but surveys suggest that so many in our churches today who even identify as evangelicals do not hold to even what would be described as Christian worldview beliefs. So the concept of a Christian worldview, which I dabbled in this summer a little bit, but the concept of a Christian worldview, I just felt like, wow, that could be the basis for an entire series. What is it, first of all, and then what difference does it make? And so we're going to spend the first couple of weeks kind of building out what we are now calling our gospel vision frame, a vision frame tool. But what does gospel vision look like? And then kind of making sure we understand that. And then the last 2 weeks particularly, and all these messages from the book of Romans, but in the last 2 weeks to really talk about some of the hot button issues that we are facing in the culture, that people are wrestling with, and trying to help people understand how we think about these things. We're not trying to be controversial or provocative or argumentative. And for those who may feel that way, I don't know, somebody may feel that way. That's not at all what we're trying to do. We're trying to simply say this is the way followers of Christ look at information and process information and make the decisions they do. And there are reasons why many Christians inevitably come to the same conclusions on a certain number of issues. But I'm more interested in how you think than what you think. Because if I can teach you how to think biblically, discern wisely, choose carefully. If we can learn how to think, then you're going to get to the what to. And I think for our rising generation of our children and students, we need to teach them how to think biblically, how to think Christianly. Not so much what to think, because if you just tell them what to think, but not how to think, they may accept it without argument for a while. But then at some point they will be challenged. And if they haven't been taught how to see the world and process information through a gospel vision frame, then they will inevitably come up with different conclusions and have different convictions than those that are taught in the Bible. So we need to learn to see the world with gospel vision, and that's what the series is all about.
Yeah, and I thought there was a great part in the sermon where you broke down one issue in particular, and you just did it. You did it through, see, when this is your lens through which you see the world, you can see how you logically end up at this conclusion, and when this person sees the world through this lens, they can logically end up at this conclusion.
Yep.
And what I thought it was so great about what you did, and if you missed it, we'll put the link in the podcast info, you can go back and watch it, but it just sort of demystified maybe some of it, maybe took some of the really the energy or the hateful energy that can buzz around some of these conversations, and just say, hey, I kind of see how you got there based on your set of priorities and the way you see the world.
Right, excuse me. Yeah, exactly. It's you. What you see determines what you choose. And instead of getting angry at somebody, again, I use the conversation of somebody describing the coast in Oregon versus somebody describing the coast in Clearwater. Great. Well, there's no sense if you're having a conversation, let's say on the phone, and somebody's describing what they see, and it's very different than what you see, getting mad at them and yelling at them. There are no rocks on this beach. There are no crashing waves. It's not cold outside. I'm in Clearwater. It's sunny. The sand is beautiful. The sea is calm. I can either get mad at them because they don't see what I see, or I can understand they're looking through a different window frame altogether. Now that I understand what they see and why when I describe what I see, they think I'm crazy. Once I understand that, now I can actually begin to communicate with them by saying, well, let me tell you the frame I am looking through. And I think we can do that by asking those 4 transcendent questions that we talked about. How you answer those questions. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why is everything broken? Is there any hope? And how does it all end? These 4 framing questions that are great conversation starters for people who may have completely different worldviews than you do. But those conversations are great, or those questions are great conversation starters. And I think rather than getting angry because somebody looks at the abortion issue, for instance, or a transgender issue, for instance, and they see it completely different, you just want to yell at them, and they yell back at you, and you throw a bumper sticker, and they throw a bumper sticker, and you post Facebook, and they post Facebook, and it doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
But if you could sit down and say, well, let's talk about these questions. Why is there something rather than nothing? What do you think is the source of the brokenness in the world? Where do you find your hope? those are conversations that I think we can dig around, root around in conversations. They're open-ended conversations that might be carried on over weeks and months. But if you can have a friendship and converse about those things, that's where I think you can begin to help people see something that's different than what they see.
Right.
Because they're looking through a different vision. It's not a gospel vision.
Right. And those questions are so great. And either last week or the week prior, you talked about how one of our pastors, Tom Hudgens, uses "Tell me your story" as one of those questions. They're so built around listening. And too often, I remember a sermon you gave a couple months ago. I thought it was a great little factoid that stuck with me. The number one indicator of road rage was that you had a bumper sticker on your car, and you made sure to point out it didn't matter what the bumper sticker said. It just meant that you thought it worthwhile to shout this thing back at everybody behind you. So I love that. I love the listening that's implied when you ask those questions, because you need to pause and listen. You don't just wait for.
Well, and I think that's as we think about evangelism, I think that's how we have to think about evangelism in a postmodern culture. Is we have to be willing to listen. We have to be willing to ask the open-ended questions. Yes, there is a time to sit down and say, "Let me explain to you the gospel A, B, C." Here's the Romans road. I do think you have to share the gospel, and you have to get to that point where you can and do effectively share the gospel. But I think the beginning is, hey, tell me your story, or asking some of those open-ended questions that help us see the vision people are coming from, and then help us, give us a right. If you listen to people, you kind of earn the right to be heard too, don't you? Like if I spend 20 minutes listening to you, then I get the right to say, well, can I tell you my story? And then to be able, again, to focus on that gospel frame, that gospel vision is what I think is going to help us in having conversations. And as I said, it's going to help us grow, it's going to help us communicate with others, and it's also going to help us endure when times get difficult, because when we have a gospel vision, it allows us to ground our courage in our convictions.
I wanted to ask one primary follow-up question to the message. And again, a lot of what we just covered was a recap from the message. So you can go back and listen to that if you missed it. Again, we'll put the link in the podcast description. But I wanted to ask one kind of primary follow-up question, which was that you kind of started, you showed this sign. I know I've seen a couple in my neighborhood. Some people have seen them maybe other places. And I tell you this, here's my little funny thing about the sign. The first time I saw this sign you pointed out, the first thought I had was, that's a lot of words on a very little sign, and I'm driving by you, so I can't read that much that quickly. But it's a sign, a yard sign some people have, and it's like Black Lives Matter, something about women's rights.
Or human rights.
No
humans are illegal.
Science
is real.
You called it, I think, a secular creed.
Secular creed is what Rebecca McLaughlin. Several people asked me about the book, and again, I've used her name and referenced her several times. Rebecca McLaughlin. Maybe J.D. Greer told me he thinks she's the best apologist out there today. And again, with all due respect to some great apologists out there, but she is really writing with current voice. And she has a book entitled The Secular Creed, where she literally breaks down the arguments of the sign, but she does it in such a respectful and a gracious and even a challenging way to those of us who are believers. Like, hey, you need to realize what's coming behind that slogan, but it is also a beautiful apologetic to somebody. So it's the kind of book, honestly, maybe if two friends were talking about opposing worldviews, that they might agree to read. Hey, could we read this book and circle back and talk about it? What did you think about chapter 3? Where did you think she was right and wrong? I think she would say that that's an excellent way to use the book. But the book is entitled The Secular Creed, and she really talks about that sign and these creedal statements that epitomize the current secular culture.
And that's good. We'll put that link in the podcast description too, so you can just click on that to get it. You can check there for it. But my question was, because you touched on this in the sermon, so many of the core thoughts behind a lot of those sentiments are, if you couldn't say rooted, you could at least say found in Christian belief, in one of our older belief systems in the world. So my question I wanted to kind of just talk with you about today on the podcast was, there's so much of this that's found in the scripture. There's so much of this, women's rights are human's rights. Like, man, you look at the way that Jesus handled women in his ministry, and it's ground shaking. It's fundamentally different than his peers. There's so much in there, and yet here we are in 2021, and it feels like as an American evangelical Christian, you're painted in a narrative in some ways of like, well, the American evangelical Christian doesn't care about women's rights, doesn't care about Black Lives Matter, doesn't care about other people that look different than them. So how did we get? And again, I struggled even a little bit just before we started how to even frame the question. At least in a national narrative standpoint, how did the caricature of the American evangelical church get so far removed?
Well, it's a great question, and again, I think it's important to establish the premise of the question, which you've done well, but just to kind of restate it, which is when you look at, and this is something Rebecca McLaughlin does a tremendous job in her book, and I quoted her at length in the message. And it was kind of the moment where, you could just tell people were applauding, they were with you. Mm-hmm. It was quoting her. But she makes the comment, going through every line of this new secular creed. First of all, I thought it was profound to identify it as a secular creed. Mm-hmm. It's like a creed, just like a Christian creed. But this is now the new belief statements. We believe in science. We believe kindness is everything. Love is love. No humans are illegal. It's obviously slogans, political slogans that come from the left side of the political spectrum. And it was a reaction. It actually started the sign after the Trump election in 2016. So this was kind of a left side of the political spectrum reacting to what they saw as a radicalism in American life, and this sign kind of took off. Somebody did this, and now you can see it in lots of places. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it was interesting she identified a secular creed. But I also thought what was really interesting in her book was that she did, as you said, you root around under, she says, when you look at the soil beneath each one of these claims, it's mm-hmm. Christian soil. And that if you remove the teaching, a Christian worldview, it's not going to be, her line was, you're not going to find a solid secular rock. You're going to find a gaping hole that is going to swallow everything. And your question is, and I think that's so important, the reason Black Lives Matter is because there is a premise that all human lives matter, even if they're not in your tribe. Mm-hmm. Even if they're not in your race or ethnicity, they matter as much as you do. She argues that idea was nonsense before Jesus. That idea is nonsense in the history of humankind. It's all about your tribe.
Right.
It's your tribe, and it's us versus them. It's Jesus that taught us to love our neighbor as ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's it's the Christian gospel that teaches all people are created in the image of God. Again, tell a Roman in the Roman Empire, you know what? All people are made in the image of God. All people matter to God equally, whether you're Roman or not. And that's nonsense.
Right.
It's preposterous nonsense. The Christian gospel is what revolutionized this. Women's rights. Well, look at where the Christian gospel has influenced the world, and that is where you will see women treated with respect and given rights and valued. Look at places in the world where other belief systems have taken hold, and they will be the most glaring examples of where women are very often objectified and where their rights are at times very, very limited. So I think her premise is a correct one.
Yeah.
Your question goes a step further. How do we get there? Mm-hmm. How do we get there? It's a great question. I think of two things, and I don't know either answers it. The first is I want to talk about is the failures of the church at times. Mm-hmm. Let's acknowledge the failures of those of us who are followers of Jesus to sometimes fully live out the Christian gospel, to fully be consistent in our choices and in our ethics and in our institutions with operating from a Christian vision frame, a gospel vision. That is, sometimes we have been more cultural than we have been gospel. Mm-hmm. And so people can look to church institutions and Christian institutions and sometimes see that women haven't been treated as Jesus treated them, as the early church treated them,
right?
Or sadly, how part of the racial divide in America is to look at the history of some expressions of Christianity in America that excused racism and defended racism. Now, that's not wholly true, completely true, because there are many Christians who did not. Again, the abolition movement in America was fueled in part by people who were, you would call them evangelicals, and who believed in the evil of slavery, both in Britain and in America. But there is no question that there were massive expressions of Christianity, particularly in the South, and I'm a Southerner, that defended racism and excused racism. So when people look at the failures of the church in a society, and they say, see, look, they want to equate the failures of Christians and the failures of Christian institutions with the message of Christianity.
Right.
And we can see why they would do so. And so as society changes, and in the eyes of some progresses from some of these abuses and progressing from racism, for instance, what you do look at sometimes are the Christian institutions that were less open to change, less embracing of reform. And it's easy then to say they are the problem, we are the solution. To look at Christianists, they're the problem.
Right.
But to look at those who now see themselves as irreligious and say, we're the solution. We're the ones who are open-minded. We're the ones that are breaking free from these constraints.
Right.
But it's not quite true. It's not even close to true. Because the reason you see those things as right and wrong, actually, when you dig down deeper in the soil, is because of a Christian messaging that taught you that all people are created equal, that taught you that women should be valued as of equal worth and their rights should be defended, and sexual violation was wrong and it is not justified no matter how much power you have. Where do you get that? You don't get that from Hollywood. I mean, what did you get from Hollywood? You got Harvey Weinstein from Hollywood. You know, you don't get those values from Hollywood. You don't get those values from corporate culture. You don't get those values naturally from evolutionary principles. Those values are contrary to all those.
Right.
Where do those values come from? I'll tell you where they came from. They came from Jesus of Nazareth. That's where they came from. So first, I would point to the failures of the church. The second thing I would point to is the tendency of human nature that you just see lived out, and we're seeing it lived out in Western civilization. The tendency of human nature, you can see this particularly even in the Jewish people in the Old Testament. There's a cycle. And the cycle is they were in trouble. They called out upon God. God rescued them and saved them and blessed them. They became prosperous and peaceful and arrogant and forgot God. And they brought judgment back on themselves. There's this cycle in human nature that you forget where you've come from and you forget what the source of your blessings are. And I think we're seeing that in the West, that in Western civilization, there has been so much freedom and so much prosperity that today people are forgetting where it came from. And they are now believing that these things are natural. It's natural to want to treat everyone with love and respect and kindness. Actually, no, those things are not natural at all. They are given to us by the teachings of Jesus. So I think part of it is the human nature, forgetting where you come from, forgetting the source of your blessings. And then part of it is the failures of the church. And by the way, also failures in society. That there are a lot of people today in the Gen X, millennial range that are looking at American society and they're seeing the failures of it. But they don't also see the blessings that are also there. For instance, it's so popular to condemn America because of its racist past and slavery. Well, that's very true.
Yeah.
But who is saying that America also fought a war to end slavery? That thousands of people who were not African American actually went to battle to end slavery, along, by the way, with some very courageous African Americans. But in other words, the African American population could not have achieved that on their own. They were too much of a minority. They were dependent upon some belief in the greater society that their voice was right, that their claim for justice was rooted in some transcendent value, so that many, many thousands of people in different ethnicities rose up to say what they're saying is right. Slavery is unjust. That also happened in America.
Right.
That the civil rights movement was dependent not just on motivating African Americans, which it did, and they had a courageous voice to point out the injustices of American society, but the whole success of it was predicated on that there would be enough other people who would hear their voice and say, they're right. These things are unjust. And what they're saying is a cry for justice, and they should be heard, and we should change. Well, why did people say that? Why were there enough people that said you shouldn't sick dogs on people who are asking for the right to vote?
Yeah.
Well, why? Because we knew instinctively that what they were saying was true. And why did we know that what they were saying is true? Because there is a Christian soil that was part of our past and has taught us that all people matter to God. So that would be my stab at it. There may be other reasons, but I think those are the reasons that help us understand why people actually see the message of Jesus as the enemy, when in reality it's the message of Jesus that gives birth to freedom and love and liberty and so forth.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a lot on this podcast, and because I even... Yeah, I feel for the person that wants to engage, that wants to ask some of these questions to their neighbors, and might think to themselves, why do I have to like defend, this faith from these things, or what about all their presuppositions about what Christians think or how Christians act?
Yeah.
And I think like that's one of the reasons to lean into doctrine and theology and things, because I think you'll find, even if whatever your personal history with the church might be, the more you lean into the teachings of Jesus and the more you lean into the scripture, you're going to like what you find there.
The more you can bring people back to Jesus. That's the beauty of the Christian faith, is we're always trying to get back to the teaching of Jesus and his apostles. I think one of the things is not to be on the defensive so much. When you have conversations, and remember, they're getting... Like, if you're dealing with people with a secular mindset, they're getting fed information on Facebook that's every bit as caricatured and bizarre and unfair as some of the things I see Christians putting on Facebook, which is quite embarrassing. So they're getting fed as much nonsense. And when they come, if you have people that you begin to engage in spiritual conversations and they want to come at it from, hey, the church has done this, Christians have done that, I don't know that you need to defend some of that. I think you can say, you know what, you're right. There's a lot of people that have done things in the name of religion. There are a lot of churches that have fallen way, way short of the teachings of Jesus. When they say, well, all Christians believe that. Well, you're right. There are a lot of Christians that are saying things that, and I don't know whether they're Christians or not. But I think what you can do is say to your neighbor, but I'm not saying that. And I'm asking you not to believe that everything you read on Facebook is true.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I care about you. I care about your rights. I care about your civil rights. I want you to care about mine. And I care. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
So I think it's destroy the caricature. Don't try to defend the church from everything. The church, some of what people have done in the name of church and Christianity is indefensible. So acknowledge that. But get back to the message of Jesus. Say, you know what, you're right. A lot of people have distorted the teaching of Jesus, but it's the teaching of Jesus that has transformed my life. And can I tell you about it? Have you read Jesus? Have you read what he said?
Yeah.
And then go back to some of those questions, that explain why you are a faithful follower of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so good. And I think it's going to be... It's interesting, this season that we're in, and it seems to keep coming up in different areas. As we look, there was a season there we were looking back through American history and trying to decide what's good and bad and all there. And you look back through church history, and you see I think just everywhere you look, the more and more you're going to see there's good and bad. There's good and bad in all of it. And especially when you look back at the church, you think, man, it's the times when you drifted off of the teachings of Jesus. It's the times when you drifted away from the scripture that things got hairy and then things got messy. So I love when we do series like this, the Wednesday night systematic theology that we're doing, because I think, as you're out and you're about and you're at work, you're at your kids' sports games and all those different things, you don't have to walk around and think, well, what do they think of me because I'm a Christian? Do they think I'm anti-science? Do they think I'm anti-women? Do they think I'm anti whatever it is? And you can know I'm not. I just know I'm not. Right. So I can have conversations and say, well, that's not me. Yeah. Like you just said, I'm not that person you're describing. So I'd love to have a conversation with you.
Right. And and again, when I understand the view from their window, mm-hmm. I understand what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. I can have patience. I can understand they're describing what they see. Now, what I want to do is not be the caricature that they think they see,
right?
And engage honest conversation, and then begin maybe challenge may sound like too provocative a word. I don't mean to win argument. We need to win people, not arguments. Mm-hmm. There's a difference.
Yeah.
But I do think you can begin to challenge the basis of their vision frame mm-hmm. by saying, why is there something rather than nothing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with science as much as you do. Mm-hmm. But aren't there questions science can't answer?
Yeah.
And there's a difference. This is probably down another rabbit trail. There's a difference between science and scientism. There's a difference between believing in science and believing a person who calls themselves a scientist can be correct about everything in life. Mm. There are questions that science can answer, and I believe in science. But although I really don't like that phrase, I don't think science asks you to believe. Science proves things.
Yeah.
But I accept science. I'm grateful for science. Mm-hmm. By the way, one part of that, I'm chasing some rabbits here. One of that is don't be stupid online as a Christian.
Yeah.
Don't say things that are anti-science.
Right.
Don't say things that are dumb because somebody shared them with you, because I honestly I cringe at some of the things that are out there, because I think if people were to look at some of our social media feeds, they're going, hey, these people believe this about that, which is so goofy. Mm-hmm. They're going way beyond what they know. If I can't trust them about that,
right,
how can I trust them about this other thing? Mm-hmm. So please be careful. Remember, if we're on a mission for God, the most important thing we ought to want to project and communicate is our faith in the Lord Jesus and our love for the Lord Jesus. And if you get all caught up in sidebar issues, you may destroy your opportunity to have a conversation about Jesus with somebody.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's good. And we're looking forward to the next several weeks here in our Gospel Vision series. Like I said, if you missed it, we'll put the link in the podcast description, or you can always go to our YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you can also catch up with the systematic theology class that's been going on here at Wednesday nights. The online class runs just a couple weeks behind, but it's been great feedback from everybody that's been tuning into that. Every week we hear more people.
And that's on, what time is it on Wednesday night?
So it streams Wednesday night at 6:45.
Right.
It's broadcast. It feels live. I'm on there hosting it. There's a group of people watching it every week. And we just were running it a couple weeks behind.
We're teaching it live here at the Clearwater campus, and then doing the video a couple weeks behind.
Yep, gives us a chance to clean it up, so it's a good experience for everybody online. And it's a great thing. We've had people who missed the second week and went back and watched it. So that's online, and there's just great resources for that kind of stuff. We also have Right Now Media, if you want to dive a little deeper in there. But lean in. I hope that's what you take away from this is lean in, because I think you'll just like more and more what you find, and you'll be more and more excited to talk about it the more you learn in this area. So thanks for tuning in. Appreciate everybody listening, leaving a review. That's very helpful to help get the word out about the podcast. We'll be back again with another episode here very soon.